Already I've opened the floodgates and we're live on Facebook now. So we'll see everyone tuning in. Welcome, welcome. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Everyone's having a great day. All right, we've got some people joining. We're at 2:00 right on the hour now. So we'll give it a couple more minutes just to let some more people tune in. But I hope everyone's having a fantastic Wednesday today. If you're in Ontario, we're getting a snowstorm tomorrow. So I'm sure everyone's hunkering down preparing for that, but I'm going to run a poll and see where people are tuning in from. Let us know what the weather is in your locale. Chris is in San Diego, so he's got the sun. We're jealous up here in Canada, but we're going to get started here in a couple of minutes. We're with Chris Chesney from Repairify. We're going to be talking about training, the Repairify Institute, which was announced at SEMA, which is the company's new training program and training center. It's going to be 6 different training centers or facilities, right, Chris? Something like that, but we'll get into the details around in the webinar, but we're going to be here for an hour. And just to give you kind of a high level overview, we're going to be talking about, like I said, the Repairify Institute training topics that we think are important. And feel free to let your questions roll in throughout the webinar. We'll get to them at the end. Got lots of representation from Alberta here today. Hello, Albertans. Some other from the US, I assume. Atlantic Canada, Ontario, lots of representation. So tell your friends we are live here. There will be a recording of this session as well. So if you do have to drop off, or if you know someone that wanted to tune in, but they're not able to make it, then it's closed captioning. Sorry, it's just that's cool. Zoom has a new closed captioning feature. Yep. That's neat. Yep. Anyway, so awesome. Like I said, let your questions roll in. Throughout the webinar, we're going to be talking about different training styles, different things that Repairify is going to be addressing through the Repairify Institute at a high level, training topics over the industry and, complex collision repair and clearing it up. That's what the webinar is all about today. So thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. We'll get started here in just a second. Man, Alberta, you guys are showing up today. There's like half of the people here from Alberta. That's awesome. I hope everything's good out west there. Let's get started though. Like I said, we're here with Chris Chesney from Repairify. He is the VP of Training and Organizational Development. We're going to be talking about the Repairify Institute. So before we get started, let's just let Chris have the mic. I know you've got a long history in the automotive industry. So tell us about your experience and what you do with Repairify now.
That's a nice way of saying I'm old, Allison. I've been in the industry forever. I've spent my entire life in the industry. I grew up on a cattle farm in the middle of Kansas, and was struck by a cover of Road and Track magazine when I was 7 years old that showed the image of Phil Hill sitting in a shark-nosed Ferrari. And I opened the magazine up and I went, ooh, that's cool. And I knew from that point on in my life, I wanted to work with cars. And 52, 50, however many, 60 years later now from that point, I'm still doing that and have been blessed to have a career in mostly the mechanical side of the industry up until about a year and a half ago. And at that point, I retired from leading CarQuest Technical Institute for Advanced Auto Parts for 22 years and took early retirement. And then Chris Hollingsworth from Repairify called me the first day of retirement, and I joined the company a little over a year ago, and am excited to learn more about the collision side of the industry. But you know what, Allison? The car doesn't know where it's at. It just, whoever's working on a vehicle is working on it in the context that they're asked to look at the vehicle. The vehicle is the vehicle. The technology doesn't change based on the building it's in or the person working on it. So all I've done in the industry over the last, especially 30 years in training, applies to the collision side of the industry. And it's really timely because as all the safety systems that are built onto today's vehicles start to fail or deteriorate or are damaged in a collision, the collision centers really need the expertise or the skill set in their building to handle those systems, which are tied to the data network systems on board. And I will tell you that the ADAS systems, the safety systems, are nothing more than another node on the network. And on the mechanical side, we kept it really simple. On the collision side, it's kind of, oh my gosh, what is this that I have to deal with? So now we have the opportunity to kind of bring all of that together and share the content that we've developed on the mechanical side over the last number of years, and bring the industry together as we try to serve the motorist in an effective way.
Interesting. I'm sure a lot of people on here would not be interested to know how the mechanical side of the technical things cross over into collision repair more specifically. But would you say that the mechanical side's been working on the technological things that were like ADAS and stuff in the diagnostic world longer than the collision spaces, and why is that?
I think we've probably been aware of it longer, just from the standpoint that it's just another node on the network. It's another computer that communicates on a data bus or a network that has conversations with all the other controllers in the vehicle, and they're designed to perform certain functions. And that's not a new science or technology in the mechanical space, because data networks have been on vehicles for decades. What is new in the collision world is the advent of those safety systems and the need to, number one, pre-scan the vehicle before you approach the vehicle and work on the vehicle, or even do an estimate, so that you know what was in play before the collision event, and that you scan the vehicle once you're done. And that gets all of the conversation going on around pre-scanning and post-scanning. But there's so much that happens between those two events. Knowing how the vehicle arrived and knowing that it's working the way it was designed to work before it leaves is hypercritical. But all the little elements in the middle of fixing the network, or a controller, or calibrating a system after it's been repaired, because you had to replace a radar sensor, which is just a controller on the network, but because of the way the car was hit, something kind of touched the front of the radar sensor, and it looks normal, but it's not calibrating or won't communicate because that plastic deflected into the gold foil behind it and deformed it, and now doesn't work. All those little things that, a mechanical tech that's trained to diagnose data network problems and has the skill to do so, the collision shop needs to have that available to them as they're trying to, number one, evaluate the car as they put the estimate together and the repair plan together, but also as they repair the vehicle, validating that step was done correctly before they get to the end and do the post scan and deliver the vehicle to the motorist or the customer, and find out that, oops, something happened in between the pre-scan and the post scan. So at that point, the car is just a car. How it was damaged or how it failed is really inconsequential, other than in a collision, I'm usually looking for, in the impact area, I'm usually looking for physical damage. In the mechanical space, I may be looking for corrosion in a connector or software updates that really don't present themselves in any way other than a skilled tech and a scan tool asking questions of the controllers on board and not getting the answers that make sense, and recognizing that either the controller is bad and needs replaced, or it needs to be updated as far as software or something along those lines. So the opportunities that we have are to just deliver the same content between the mechanical and the collision space, but maybe with a slightly different context of how we search for the cause of the problem, like an impact area or a code or something of that nature.
Absolutely. That there's a lot obviously to process there. A lot of inner topics to like the collision industry needs to process and understand training wise. So you say that they need to be addressed by the collision repair industry, but specifically when you say that, who do you mean? Like technicians, shop owners? Do you mean the insurance side?
All of them. I mean, at the end of the day, all of us that are involved in the service of a vehicle, whether it be a collision shop or mechanical shop, needs to understand the technology they're working on. That's number one. They can't be guessing at it. You can't be approaching a vehicle with the idea that I can learn about this on the job. And it's not that I need to know service information verbatim on an Audi before an Audi shows up. It's that I need the foundation skills of data networking and foundation electronics and problem solving skills and reading skills that we talked about before we went live, to be able to research the problem, run a series of tests to validate the issues that I see and make a decision of what to do next. Diagnosing and solving problems on vehicles, whether it be a damaged circuit or network or panel or controller, or it's caused by corrosion due to time, is asking a series of questions that you need answers to. As a technician, one of my first questions might be, what's the battery condition? I would wager a bet that battery testing is one of the last things on the mind of a collision shop when they're doing a repair plan and an estimate on the vehicle. And I will tell you that 1 out of every 4 vehicles on the road needs a battery. And if that 1 out of every 4 vehicles needs a battery, it's simply because they're 4 years or more old, and batteries degrade within about a 4-year time period. If we don't take that into account right up front, then everything else that we're potentially pulling in the way of data from a scan tool or multimeter or whatever needs to be discounted or questioned because the battery is not proper. It's not up to speed. And that can cause problems. So to just to roll that back into context, I don't care if where the car's at. If it's rolling into a service center of any kind, collision or mechanical, the battery needs to be considered right up front, because it's what controls or powers all these technologies on board. And I think that it's probably one of the most ignored systems on the vehicle, and catches technicians out all the time.
It's funny because it's such a simple.
It's like your remote. I can't get the remote to work.
Yeah.
And what do? You beat on it, you rotate the batteries around, and finally you go put a new set of batteries in it, and the remote works. Same type of situation.
And you mentioned, I mean, you don't need to know if an Audi's coming in, and you don't need to automatically know exactly every step in the process. You don't need to know exactly how to calibrate this or, address this exact Audi, but to have a foundational understanding. I think that's where a lot of people get hung up. They think that they need to know it all. And it's just more about a foundation. Yeah,
I don't want to discount that you don't need to have intimate knowledge of how Audi prepares their vehicles, how Audi wants their vehicles calibrated, what technologies you need to apply, what tools you need to own, how they approach or apply different strategies than somebody else. Maybe Audi and you've got a Volkswagen next to it, and the systems look the same because they're in the same family of vehicle, but Audi applies a different strategy on a certain system than the other. You can find that in service information. It's more efficient if you know that there's differences there when you approach the repair planning. But at the end of the day, you've got to have those foundation skills of problem solving and reading and researching and testing with a multimeter, scan tool. You don't want to learn how to run a scan tool and navigate it, or you don't want to learn how to navigate service information at the fender of the car when you're trying to answer a question. You need to know how to navigate service information before you get there.
Talk about a bottleneck.
Exactly. You're wasting not only your time and your profit, but you're wasting the time of the consumer. And that's really who's paying for all of this. And we need not lose sight of that.
Absolutely. And from a safety perspective too, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we mentioned obviously the mechanical side has been focused on this, and this advent of safety features and ADAS has kind of allowed the collision side to get in on it as well. But what are some of the barriers you think that are stopping the collision center from, or collision centers or collision industry from addressing topics like ADAS or pre and post scans? I mean, we're kind of more there now, but I know it's been kind of a journey to get there. So tell me about what do you think the barriers to training are?
I think there's several, and you'll have to convict yourself. The audience will have to convict themselves on this. One is ignorance. They just don't know. And it's the unconscious incompetent that I constantly talk about. It's the person that doesn't know that they don't know. They think they've got an understanding of all these technologies, and they just don't have it right. There's also the issue of just apathy and kind of the ostrich syndrome. I'm just going to stick my head in the sand and not worry about it and hope it doesn't bite me. And so they just ignore it because they don't think that either they don't believe in the technology or they don't understand the technology, so they're scared of it. And as I said, ADAS is just another node on the network. It's really not that hard, and it can be learned quickly. And the real end result of ADAS especially is it's a massive profit opportunity for your shop and your technicians. It's hugely profitable. It's safety systems, and we need to make sure they work properly, or we risk the liability of not paying attention to them, of sticking our head in the sand.
Mhm.
So there's all those things around just ignoring it or being ignorant about the technology. And then there's the lack of commitment by both shop owner and technician, and the combination of those. And while technicians, they hate to go take an e-learning class because I already know everything, or the comment we get out of most classroom events that are taught in a traditional way, in a linear way, is that, when you ask your tech the next morning, how was class last night? He says, well, I knew everything the instructor knew. I could have taught the class, so I really didn't learn anything. And it's because of the way we approach training or education today, as opposed to what we're trying to build out at the Repairify Institute. So there's that resistance to going and participating because I think I'm not going to learn anything because of my past experience with education programs or online training or virtual training or whatever mode your experience has placed you in. But then there's the lack of commitment by the shop owner to growing the skills within their four walls.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you're going to stay relevant in this industry, whether you're on the collision or mechanical side, is to stay up with the technology on the vehicle by ensuring that your team has the appropriate skills to serve your customer. That doesn't mean they have to have every skill. That doesn't mean that an ATech in your building needs to be able to know everything about every car and can solve every problem. That means the technician that's working on a car needs to have these skills to solve the problem on the car they're working on. It's all about putting the skill and the technology in the right place at the right time. And so one of the concepts that I've been kind of floating in the industry over the past several months is the idea that instead of, and this probably applies as much to the collision side, but maybe not quite as much on the mechanical, in other words, more on the mechanical, less on the collision. It's the idea of not giving a job to a tech and expecting them to do services that they don't have the skill to do, that they'll just work their way, or they're overqualified to do a certain task, or they're underqualified to do that task. So an example might be if you're doing ADAS calibrations and you're using OEM processes and you don't have a trained tech and you're having the wash boy do that service without training or without technology applied, then that's a disservice to the customer. Conversely, if you have that technology in place that can guide a less skilled person, but one that's trained, instead of putting your most advanced technician on that calibration and keeping them away from being productive in the things that they're highly skilled at and need to be productive in to improve your margins and your bottom line, that's a disservice to the technician and your business. So it's all about bringing all that kind of together and identifying how we dispatch to the skill and how we inventory what skills we need in our building, and we grow that skill and then ensure that that skill continues to grow and become enhanced as the technology advances. That's a complex answer, but I've got a method to my madness here.
No, for sure. It absolutely makes sense. Some people might need to rewatch that back to get a full framework of it, but I was taking my little scrawling notes here. But it's funny that you say one of the barriers is just the lack of, not commitment from on the technician side, but, just going into it and thinking like, I'm not going to learn anything. This is pointless. I actually have a friend, not to throw him under the bus. He's not on this call right now, so it's fine, but he's participating in industry training right now. And he was telling me this is pointless. This is boring, like blah, 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 blah. He doesn't work in the technician side. So maybe not as quick, like quite relevant, but
Right.
I've seen it in action. And it's these general overviews and these big training sessions that are they still really effective? And I want to dive into how you're going to be offering training at the Repairify Institute. But we kind of touched on it a little bit, but how would you explain the traditional in-person training style kind of used in the industry today and how it differs? We'll get into the Repairify process, but what's it look like, the traditional training style, and how do you think it's ineffective?
I mean, look at how your kids are taught in school. It's the same thing in education in the automotive sector. Somebody like our company or another company that creates training content will create content in a linear fashion. First, I need to tell you this, then I need to tell you that. Don't interrupt me. I'm not at the end of my slide deck yet. I've got to tell you 3 more things. And then I'm going to ask you 3 questions to see if you understood what I told you. It's the old sage on the stage process where we're walking through a PowerPoint deck and we've got to use all of our slides, or I don't think I'm doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, that is really not addressing the need of the individual that's sitting in front of that instructor. Now, there's really good instructors that do instructor-led training that ask a lot of questions and can gauge where individuals are within their classroom, but it's difficult and that skill is rare. They might ask questions and they can recognize that, oh, I've got to back up and I've got to spend some time with this topic or this foundation skill before I can move on, or that student's not going to get it. At the same time, there's 3 guys in the back of the room that are master techs that fully understand that and they're totally bored. To your point, because they've got that I know that I'm a conscious competent. I know that I know that. Mm-hmm. And you're wasting my time by talking about that. So today we train with the idea of trying to bridge a gap in knowledge without first understanding what that gap is. No assessments, and there's assessments out there. Don't get me wrong, Allison. The traditional assessment might be 100 questions on the vehicle bumper to bumper, where we're asking 10 questions on a system and expecting to know the knowledge base and identify the gaps in that technician's knowledge with 10 questions. Mm-hmm. Totally insane.
No,
not possible.
Yeah.
50 years ago, that was possible because I was working on a wiring diagram that fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I memorized everything, but today that's impossible. Mm-hmm. So instead of identifying that gap and then trying to remediate that gap, we tend to take a student who has a thirst for knowledge in a certain area. They know they have something that's missing, and they have that thirst. They want that glass of water that'll quench that thirst. We throw them in the deep end of the swimming pool and expect them to swim around in 100,000 gallons of water with a glass, trying to find that cup of water that'll quench that thirst. And they get lost. So they're hearing all this information, and the first thing out of the instructor's mouth is something I already know. I shut down. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ignore you. And so all of this training that we're doing, with the best intentions in mind, fall on deaf ears most of the time. Mm-hmm. Those that really want to learn are paying attention. Mm-hmm. But those that we've invested in and we've made a commitment to grow their skill, there's a technician shortage out there. I don't know if anybody has recognized that yet. And so those that we have on board, if they're willing to allow us to invest in them, we need to send them to training that is focused on them, not everybody else in the room. Mm-hmm.
So how do you find those gaps? I mean, you mentioned obviously a 10-page questionnaire is not going to divulge the gaps or the areas of interest for a certain individual, but how do you find that from the Repairify Institute perspective?
So let's start traditionally. Traditionally, a curriculum developer will identify a topic and create maybe 5 objectives within a 4-hour class that they want to accomplish. here's the outcomes, here's what you should take away, here's what you should be able to learn from this content. And those 5 topics are very high level. They aren't granular enough to give a skill or transfer a skill or a knowledge nugget to a tech, because we're just guessing at what they don't know, and we're sending them big blocks of information that we hope they can absorb. What we're doing is moving to an adaptive learning model. And we've partnered with a company called Area 9. They're a Danish company who really started their path in supporting surgeons in Europe. So you can imagine a heart surgeon going to a class on how to take blood pressure and how to take somebody's temperature. Dude, he doesn't want to do that because he knows how to do it. He hadn't done it in 20 years because the nurse does that. That's baselining or triaging your vitals, taking your vitals when you go into the doctor's office. But there's a new heart surgery technique that's out, and he's there to learn that. And so what they created was an algorithm and a process of creating content that creates micro objectives. And we're talking about, say, a 4-hour class traditionally that has 5 objectives. In an adaptive model might have 200 objectives. And each of those objectives has a series of questions or probes that we create that you can present, or the system presents to the learner, that the answers to those questions, coupled with their confidence in that answer, partnered with their self-assessment in that topic, will allow us to either ask another question to validate that they've got it and move on, or just move on, or ask 2 or 3 more questions and say, whoa, Allison really doesn't have this. She thinks she does. This is an unconscious incompetence. She thinks she knows that she knows, but she doesn't know. And so after those questions, which are really simply put assessments, they're micro assessments of a particular micro objective. And if you don't have it, we're going to serve up a piece of content that addresses that micro skill or knowledge base. And we're going to remediate that, and then we're going to move on. And if you already have it, as we ask a question or 2, you move down that path quickly. So that course that has 200 objectives, micro objectives included in it, could take a person that's really doesn't know anything about the topic. They're a beginning level student. They assess themselves as a beginner. We're going to serve up more detailed content to them at the beginning. They're not confident in their answers. We're going to cycle them through more content. That may take them 2 hours to go through. Whereas the person that's skilled, highly skilled, but just has a gap, and they go through the content really quickly until we identify, whoa, there's the knowledge gap that you have, because we can identify that through our assessment. Let's remediate that and get you out of here. You can get out of there in 15 minutes. And now you're not wasting the time of the guy sitting in the back of a regular classroom, totally ignoring what the instructor's saying. You're giving that technician, that student, the ability to learn a skill, because they'll recognize that, ooh, I had that wrong, and get through the course and be certified, credentialed, whatever term we end up using, to promote this. And they're down the road to the next step in the process, and they get through that quickly. But in the meantime, they're growing their skill, and they recognize it. So now they see value in taking the course, because they're not going to be wasting their time. The system has the ability to see that, recognize it, and move them on down the path.
And value from a shop owner's perspective too, because I know one of the things we were talking about before we went live here was, the tendency for shop owners to lean away from training, or training on buying equipment and then leaving it in the corner. But a lot of people, what I've heard from the situation that we're in right now, and post-pandemic especially, it was a struggle. But and in the labor shortage, people don't want to send their highly skilled techs to training for, say, 3-4 days or a week. and people are tired of online training. So from a shop owner perspective, something like this is extremely attractive, I would think.
Yeah, and to be, to be fully transparent, it's going to take time to create the catalog of content, of adaptive content
Absolutely.
out. It's going to take us years to build our full catalog. It's going to take probably another 6 to 8 months to build out a meaningful catalog. In the meantime, we'll have our traditional training that will supplement as we continue to convert those courses to adaptive models, but we'll also start applying adaptive techniques and technology to our virtual training, our virtual classroom, where during COVID, we got used to sitting on meetings like this, and those could be quite boring. My previous life, we created an award-winning model that created almost a personal virtual classroom event where the instructor is in a live lab running demos in front of the students with technology or just a service skill or whatever on a high resolution camera, and is communicating with chat, not with students, but actually has chat pulled up and is talking to chat, which is a bizarre skill that some people have naturally, but it creates a scenario where the virtual classroom results in somewhat of a more personalized instructor-led event, and can be can align with their knowledge gaps and can apply some assessment, adaptive assessment during the process, which can scale up quickly, can be attended or delivered from anywhere on the planet. Well, with latency, you want to be in the continent, but it allows them to keep their people at home, take online training, take virtual training, and grow that knowledge base, and ensure that they've not wasted their time on learning things they didn't need to learn, but find those gaps in knowledge, and that gets us to a better place than we are today. And then that takes us to the next step with how do we validate that they really can put it into action.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I know when I was at the press conference when you guys announced this, and I know you were saying that this was adaptive learning has never been done in the collision repair industry before. So of course it's going to take some time to fill out the catalog and understand how this is going to work in a collision repair space and the effective principles. But I want to run a poll here and ask the audience if they find their learning needs are met while we move on to our next question. But and also, you guys are getting a surgeon's education, like Chris said, with the. So, I mean, take that into account with Repairify and tell people you were trained by a surgeon in kind of a way. So
we
I know
always wanted to align ourselves with the medical industry.
Yeah, no. I mean, just kidding.
If we're going to do so, we need to step up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cars is patience. All right. So most people say, there's actually 20% of people say they don't find that their learning needs are met in traditional in-person training sessions, 25% now. That's very interesting, I think. And I know Canadians are often plagued with we have a training center opening up courtesy of Volkswagen, the Canadian Welding Bureau, coming up soon. But in terms of that, we don't really have much. And we have, Fixed Network has a training center, some other, they're scattered. But for OEM training, we don't really have anything up here. And there's a lot of traveling involved for Canadians. And even with the new center being in Ontario, a lot of people from out west will have to come through. So that obviously kind of affects the in-person training level. And people kind of have some weird feelings sometimes about online training right now. How do you think that we as an industry can kind of, I mean, we're talking about adaptive learning here, but how do you think we as an industry can kind of push past these things and, encourage industry training and specifically in the online realm? Because I'm very interested to hear how the adaptive learning really works in an online setting and how it can, be more equal to an in-person setting.
Yeah, well, I think just by the nature of how the training, the adaptive learning model assesses, identifies the gap quickly, remediates the gap, and lets them get out, answers the majority of the problem and the majority of the resistance that we see because of their experience, their past experience with online training, which is, 10 slides and 3 questions, and you get a certificate And that doesn't mean you learned anything. It doesn't mean you learned nothing, but it's not detailed enough and it's not validated in a way that we know that you have that knowledge.
Mhm.
That's the one thing that the micro objectives and the probes that go with them, the questions that go with them, does is it allows us to validate that you got it. And if there's any question, we have the ability, this won't be right out of the gate, but we have the ability to say, okay, Allison really struggled in this one area. So in a week, I'm going to push her a different challenge via email through our learning management system that says, Allison, we want you to take this little micro learning piece. And it may, we'll give you a time of 5 minutes or something like that. And it may just be another piece of content to reinforce what you learned in the course last week. Or we may do something along the lines of assigning you a homework project, assigning you a skill that you need to go perform under the guidance of a mentor in your shop who can report back into the system that Allison got it. She absolutely got it. I helped her with the issue, and you report that back to the system, and now you've got credit. And that gives the shop owner more confidence that the investment that I'm making in the system and in you is worthwhile because the system is telling me that with confidence that you can do that skill. Now, that is not going to be 100%. There's certain things that we can validate that way, but our model is designed to ultimately, when you have the knowledge acquired and you put it into action for a period of time, then we'll walk you through our proof of skill process, which is kind of the second leg of what we're building out at Repairify Institute. And that is modeled after the Federal Aviation Administration's process of licensing A&P mechanics in the US. And that's a 3-step process, actually 4-step. Step 1, acquire the knowledge. It's not an adaptive process for them. That's what we're implementing. Mm-hmm. Step 2 is to put that into action. And when you're prepared, take a written examination. Well, a lot of the content that we're going to deploy is we're going to highly support and suggest that you take ICAR classes or OEM courses. We're going to partner with them. I don't want to recreate everything. I just want to create the stuff that we need to create to fill the gap. And so we're highly supportive of their programs. And so we'll recognize or be, the affiliate program partners that we need to be with all these strategic partners, but you'll get your knowledge and then you'll take a written exam. If that's an ICAR exam and it's appropriate, great. If it's an ASE exam and it's appropriate, great. The last thing I want to do is write a lot of tests, but we'll do so if we need to, if we find that there's a need there or a gap there. Once they've taken the written examination, now they'll be eligible to make an appointment for a visit to one of our centers of excellence. The first one is in Richardson, Texas. We're also partnering with 3M on their new training facility in St. Paul, Minnesota. We'll partner with others as we go, but those first 2, we're gonna make sure all of this works smoothly before we invest in the real estate for another 4 or more. And if we can partner with other groups that have locations where we can go in and use their space, or they can come in and use our space, that's great. We'll walk our way through those partnerships, but you'll be able to come into our facility, and when you do, you'll be exposed to an oral examination. So if it's we use ADOS because ADOS is the one, credential everybody's asking for. So let's say you went through all the ICAR content and the validation, the practical exams they do in Chicago, or maybe someday we can do them in Richardson, but you go through all of that and you take our supplemental training that goes along with it. And you've taken the written exam and you're good to go. Then you want that credential, that proof of skill credential from Repairify. Then you make that appointment to come in and do the oral exam. The oral exam is going to be you as a technician preparing for 2 or 3 questions out of maybe a optional or the total prospect of a dozen or 2 dozen questions. So we might have 2 dozen questions that we've created for this skill or this credential. And you got to be prepared for all of them. And you come in and you're going to sit in a room with a proctor. They're going to ask the question, and you're going to have a conversation with them, and you've got to hit every point in the answer. We create a rubric around the answer so that we can measure your answer against a standard. And if you hit the mark, you pass that question. And once you've completed those 2 or 3 questions successfully, then you can go out into the lab, into the shop, and where we'll have 2 or 3 practical skills for you to complete. It may be calibrating a radar sensor. It may be doing a dynamic calibration. It may be doing just reading the service information and applying that service information appropriately. And you'll have to prepare for a dozen or 2 dozen practical skills, but we'll apply or ask you to perform 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
And if you successfully perform those, then we'll provide you a proof of skill credential to go alongside or associated with the other credential that you've earned elsewhere within RepairFi Institute. What that does is ensures that you can do it on your own. You can explain it and teach it on your own, which is part of the oral exam, and gives confidence to the student that I know this, but more importantly, gives confidence to the shop owner that I know I invested in something good and that they can do that skill on their own for money. We're going to make money doing this. And if I'm interviewing a new hire and I have a ASE certified technician over here and an ASE certified technician with proof of skill, which one am I going to interview first? I'm going to interview the one with proof of skill.
Absolutely.
Because they've proven under stress that they can perform. And this guy over here, I may not know for 6 months that they really don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the concept around the proof of skill model. And we're building that into the workflow of adaptive learning and proof of skill. That'll be what RepairFi Institute's all about as we build this thing out.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So is that the only way to obtain a proof of skill credential is to attend the Centers of Excellence or one of the training sites?
Obviously, we want to establish a series or a network of sites where you can perform those oral examinations and practical examinations. That's where we want to partner with people like 3M and others. And we see that giving us the ability to make an appointment at any of those facilities and get it within driving distance. So as we build out new centers, I'm not going to build one in Chicago if I can partner with ICAR.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to build one in St. Paul if I can partner with 3M.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to build it somewhere where they aren't, so that Allison that wants to become credentialed in this area has her proof of skill to perform, and it's 2 hours away by car to a location in, Detroit or Cleveland or Buffalo or something like that, then that's a whole different deal than trying to get on an airplane and go somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And if we can partner with these organizations to allow them to deliver their credentials and their certifications in our facilities, while they're there, they could certify in 2 or 3 different areas that different organizations provide in the same trip. Rather than having to go 14 different places to make all this work. That's we're trying to make it easy and encourage the use of it rather than put a system together that's so complex and onerous that it discourages them from participating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whenever you said 200 questions, I think some people were like, but that's not, you're not answering.
They're not going to see them all. They're not going
exactly. It's we're going to stress. And I know even
you shouldn't be working in this industry.
Yeah, if you have to do all of them, then you might want to consider a career change.
Yeah.
Um, so we've been talking about ADAS and diagnostics, but there's a lot of other topics that are going to be focused at the Repairify Institute. So product training, ADAS, advanced diagnostics, sales and leadership, all geared towards technicians and the shop owner perspective. But what is there potential for more? I know you were saying, partnering with 3M and iCar. There's that goal is to bring the adaptive learning process across the industry.
Well, not necessarily that. That would be difficult to do, and every organization that creates content has their own methodology.
Of course,
They're
yeah.
heavily invested in it. It's personal. They believe in it, and I'm not here to try to convert them.
Mhm.
I'm here to try to bring the good things together and make it easier for a shop owner or a technician to get access to it in a meaningful way. And two is to make sure that we're creating content that's going to be used and put into action. Again, I get back to an ATech doesn't need to know everything about everything. They need to have knowledge, good knowledge, and prove the skill on the things that they're going to perform in your shop. And so I think we need to start looking at it in that granular way so that we are not asking them to become doctors, with 8 years of education before they can calibrate an ADAS system. That's crazy. But we do want them to be skilled in reading and applying process and following instructions and being accurate and disciplined so that they're delivering a safe and proper repair.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So from the technician perspective, that's what we're really focusing from the Repairify Institute. From a shop owner perspective, how do they divulge what the greatest return on investment is? Like you said, the ATech doesn't have to know everything. So what areas, how do they find out what areas they should focus on and what first?
Yeah, so that's the $64,000 question. So one of the things that we're preparing to build out is just those informational, educational pieces around the adaptive learning path that we're asking them to invest in, and it's creating content early content that allows us to identify people's skill sets or gaps quickly. So that we point them to the right path of content to gain that credential. Shop owners know what they can and can't do in the shop. They know what they send to the dealer. They know what they call a mobile tech in for. They know what their people spend way too much time on and make mistakes on. They just need to catalog that and assess that. I call that inventorying your skills in the building. They know what they don't have the ability to do, and that's easy to identify because you can see them mess that up on a weekly basis. What's difficult is to catalog what they have the ability to do. Mm-hmm. So first you start with what they don't have the ability to do. Let's start remediating that, and as we do that, we discover through that process where their skill gaps are and remediate them at that point in that context. And that kind of fixes it on the other side, because certain skills are the same for different credentials. So the foundation electronic skills, electricity hasn't changed since Ben Franklin got zapped, 250 years ago. So at the end of the day, foundation electronics applies across the board. And if we've got to remediate that within a ADAS class, we can identify that that's a shortcoming, and we can shoot them off on an electronics path and remediate that over time as well. So it becomes this ecosystem of adaptive learning that you enter wherever you enter, and the system, the algorithm can identify where you really need to shore up your skills before you enter this more advanced path. Mm-hmm. And it'll be done in a way that doesn't call out a user's lack of knowledge or tell them that, hey, you're not smart enough to work on this. It's done in a way that's personal. Mm-hmm. It's quiet. It's in partnership and in consultation with the learner rather than, oh, I got a bad score. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything to a tech. What did I miss? It's like, that's one of the problems with ASE tests. In the past, you didn't know what you got wrong. Now you can take an ASE test and you get your instant results and you know exactly what you missed. That's valuable. And we're trying to apply those same things across the board with the content that we're building. And that's our challenge, is identifying the content that's meaningful right out of the gate. And then based on the feedback that we get and the results that we get, we can identify areas we need to build to help bridge those gaps. So it's a wicked web that we're weaving, but there is clarity on our side as to what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense, and I'm excited to see it all unfold. But just to clarify to the industry, these are one-on-one sessions, so that's what makes it so highly personable, right?
Well, when you're talking about e-learning, it's
Yeah.
one-on-one.
Yeah.
When you're talking about virtual, if the methodology that we apply and the techniques we use, technologies that we use, the number of people we have moderating, and managing chat, and the technology that we're using to bring in rich media content makes it feel like they're showing me the technique or the skill or the technology face to face, rather than I've got 50 other people on the line with me and we're all watching this together. So it's more of how that's applied. When it comes to the face to face, there'll still be classroom training. I'm here at ATG in our offices in San Diego, working with them for the 23 plan. And we're going to expand what we're making available to the collision industry through the content that this team has created over the years around foundation electronics and lab scope and data networking and those types of things that collision technicians need to have in their skill set to be able to solve some of the problems with the advanced systems on board the vehicles that are damaged in their shop. So.
No, absolutely. I think it makes sense. And if anyone is confused, we have the question boxes open. If you have any questions, we're nearing up on the hour here. But I just wanted to kind of close out our questions here with the effective learning training style. I mean, obviously, Chris, you have a lot of experience teaching in the industry and VP of training and organizational development. But what is the overall, in your experience, like what does an effective teaching style look like? Is it this adaptive learning process? And how do we achieve just the most clear, concise understanding? I guess we've talked a lot about this, but in your opinion?
So I've thrown a lot of ideas or a lot of technologies and concepts that we're implementing to identify gaps in knowledge, bridge those gaps, remediate them, and then validate that they can put them into action, which has always been the problem. The best way to learn by far is two elements to it. One is one-on-one, an expert, a conscious competent, working with a conscious incompetent. By far the best way. The conscious competent is somebody that knows that they know. They've proven that they know, they got it. I'm a conscious competent in certain areas. I'm a conscious incompetent in other areas. And I'll guarantee, as many years as I've been in the business, I'm an unconscious incompetent in certain areas where I think I've got it right, but I may have it wrong. I'm not bold enough to say I've got everything right, but I know that I have those opportunities to have those gaps. So the conscious incompetent is that student or apprentice that knows that they don't know and they want to learn. And it's that open mind, that open book, that enthusiastic student that wants to learn the business. And this is how I learned, is alongside a mentor, somebody who would answer my questions as I made mistakes, etc. And so that's the first thing, is that those two people working together. And then the second piece of that is unwavering commitment to learn, the desire to better yourself, and that's on the learner. And finding those people say they're just not out there. They're out there. We just have been poisoning their enthusiasm and quenching their thirst by dumping them deep into the pool and making them swim around without support or success in finding those knowledge bits. They're drowning and they're not finding the answer to their questions. I see it on I see it in online forums a lot where, man, you want an education in struggle, go look at some of the ADIS forums on Facebooks, the ADIS groups, support groups. And we're the only industry that eats its young. You get somebody in there that wants to learn how to do it, and the people that think they've got it, and many of them are unconscious incompetence, some of them are conscious competence, but they eat them up. What are you, stupid? Don't you know this? Why are you even in this industry? Well, got to start somewhere. And the one thing that we don't want to do in this industry, or shouldn't be doing, is quenching the thirst of a person that wants to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you find that unwavering thirst for knowledge, hire them, invest in them, grow them, answer their questions, but get them in training where they don't drown, and recognize when they are by talking to them and staying in touch with them, recognizing that they're struggling. If they're saying that I didn't learn anything last night and they have a thirst for knowledge, they didn't learn anything last night.
Mm-hmm.
We have them in the wrong class, or the course wasn't written well, or the instructor was wrong, or the e-learning content wasn't right. So we have to support that, and the industry as a whole has to take ownership of that at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. In regards to your first point, you kind of have to channel Socrates a little bit, guys, and admit that you know nothing. I hear that a lot. That we don't know what we don't know, especially in regards to ADAS. I mean, I was telling you about the training session, Chris, that I was at, and that was kind of the general consensus after a whole day of ADAS training. Everyone just kind of left scratching their heads still. So absolutely, and investing in those people that are the I don't want to call them keeners, but that's kind of my own experience too. I love learning, and I know a lot of us here in the industry are of the same mindset. So those are all the questions that I had. But if anyone has any further questions about the Repairify Institute, when does the first Center of Excellence open, Chris? It's in Texas, correct?
Looks like the building schedule I got last week, it looks like we'll probably move in middle of May, depending on the construction schedule. It's an existing building. We have all the plans built out. There's some modifications to the building that need to be made. It's a beautiful facility. It's going to be great. We've got classrooms, we've got labs. Our research center will be there, so you'll get exposed to that if you're there. Yeah, we've got a retail calibration center where we'll ideate workflows through a retail calibration center. So if you have the desire to stand one of those up and need a partner with that, we'll be able to help and assist you with using our technology to provide OEM services and OEM technologies to vehicles that run a calibration center at a profit. You'll be able to apprentice there. Those types of things are being put into place that really creates a center that not only provides those services for our customers, but provides a service for our own internal team to provide better services to our existing customers. So we look forward to opening probably late May, early June. We'll have an open house sometime in the summer. You'll hear about that. We'll promote that heavily. We'll invite you down, Allison, to come.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, well, we'll get a lot of photos and footage for our readers. So keep an eye out for that. I'm excited to see how the whole thing pans out. And that concludes our webinar, but thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you so much, Chris, for taking the hour here to chat with us about the Repairify Institute. And we'll see everyone next time. I guess this is our last webinar of the year, guys, but I guess awesome. January is our next one. But so Happy New Year and have a great holiday season.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Talk to you next time.